SuperTalk Mississippi media production.
Have you been seriously injured? Mama Justice is here for you. Our medical team partners with top-notch doctors, surgeons, therapists, and urologists, ensuring a comprehensive recovery journey. If you've been injured, call Mama Justice today. We're here for you.
This is Gerard Gibert, and thank you for listening to MidDays here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Rhino in the Element Wealth studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music on this
Hump Day.
And speaking of the humping around, it's the kangaroo that's jumping and hopping today. Once again, the markets, you got to talk about that early on because the reciprocal tariffs went into effect last night, overnight, on China. 104% tariffs on China, higher levies on a number of other countries also went into effect. So, that happened at 12:01 a.m. The White House confirmed the president would follow through on his threat to impose an additional 50%. Now, I think the Chinese have once again reciprocated. And they said, okay, we'll see your 50% and we'll hit you back with more. So we got ourselves a good old-fashioned trade war, but the markets continue to be incredibly volatile. I mean, the investment community doesn't know what to do. The Dow, up, down, up, down, up, down. The futures were down as much as 700 points this morning, and the Dow was down. I mean, the NASDAQ futures, 350. Right now, at the present, the Dow down 65, the S&P up 5 points, and the NASDAQ up 145. And this is because China said, okay, we're going to put 84% retaliatory tariffs after the president imposed 104% tariffs on China. 104%. Man, there's a lot of stuff, we all buy from China that is going to rise in price rather precipitously. I'm guessing it's going to sit on the shelves. I'm guessing it's not going to be imported, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of it won't make it to the shelves. It'll sit on the docks or be sent back.
Yeah. So it's a game of chicken at this point. Not sure where it's all going. Nobody knows. And that's exactly why the markets are, why they're reacting the way they are. The other thing that's just fascinating to me, we got to get to here, Rhino, is the 10-year Treasury is now sitting at 4.397. It's up. So remember how we were somewhat celebrating that there was a transition, a reallocation of funds out of the equity markets into treasuries. That's typical when investors are worried about the future of the economy and corporate profitability. It's very natural for them to move a lot of their funds and their capital into United States debt because the United States has never and will never default on its debt. So it's a safe haven. Well, when you shift more cash into treasuries, the yields fall. Simple supply and demand there. More demand drives down the yields, and that affects interest rates tied to the 10-year Treasury, mortgages, auto loans, credit card rates, etc. Except today, surprisingly, it's up. So it fell below 4%. Now it's sitting at 4.397. It was 4.5 earlier. Being reported right now, Amazon's canceling some inventory orders from China. Now, there's no American substitute in many cases. And so that just means those goods will not be available. Not sure exactly what that would be. But the Treasury situation, so I have a theory, and I'm not the only one. I didn't come up with this. I want to be clear that China may be dumping their U.S. holdings in Treasury. Now, they don't have a lot, contrary to popular belief, a lot relative to the total outstanding. $800 billion's a lot, but when you got $36 trillion out there.
But if you got 35 and some change trillion sitting on it, and all of a sudden $500 billion comes rolling in, that will make waves.
No doubt about it.
It's more than ripples. That'll make waves.
No doubt about it. Well, I also believe that domestic financial institutions and investors, I think they're delevering, and they're dumping their treasuries. So all of this means yields go up. But in the case of China, I wonder, are they using currency manipulations here? Really not even manipulations, but machinations in selling our debt. Are they using that as a trade tool? So think about it. You're China, and you're saying
the only leverage they have left.
Well, I agree. And
because other than that, their options are what? Back down, which I don't see them doing. They've kind of painted themselves into a corner where they can't.
Yep.
The yuan, their currency would have to be devalued.
Yep.
At a level of 30, 40, 50%, which is really going to have a negative impact on their society, as they've seen millions of people that would be considered impoverished climb into the middle class. They don't want to go back to being peasants, quote unquote, or they got to go to their piggy bank and pull out literally trillions from reserves to pump into their own economy, which is going to cause some pretty serious inflation, even though they control the value of the yuan. They really don't have any other leverage to try to act in this trade war other than trying to dump their treasury holdings.
I think they like what they see in the U.S. markets. I think they like seeing the markets getting clobbered, and they say, wow, we could really throw a wrench in the works by dumping our treasuries and kind of disturbing the natural order there, where when markets decline, money flows into treasuries and yields fall, which is good news for people that have debt or looking at going into debt, buying a vehicle, for example, or a house, credit card debt, which is at a record, all the above. But they're going to have to refinance in general this debt. Well, that could have a downward effect on the yuan, because they would be holding debt issued by countries that aren't quite as stable in their guarantee as this country is. So when you think about currency valuation and you look at the debt, which you're going to do on the balance sheet of a country, and you say, okay, well, you got U.S. debt, that's safe, that's secure. That's really a non-factor with respect to your currency, other than the fact that you have debt. But we're not worried about the debt, the country that issued the debt. You are when you start thinking about China refinancing with countries that aren't quite as stable. And that could be going on. I guess the point I'm making is they're diabolical. You know that. And time is not an issue for them either, nor is humanity.
To a certain extent.
Right, I agree. There's limits on everything, but they're, generally speaking, can wait things out, or inclined to wait things out longer than we are, just as a culture, as a society, as an economic system.
Yeah, that's one of the few benefits of central planning, is it allows for more long-term planning with less strife leading up to it.
And you don't have elected politicians that are worried about the next election cycle. They're safe in that regard. The Politburo is, the CCP. So this is just interesting. It's kind of unprecedented that I can think of that you would actually use currency, I guess is what I'm saying, currency games, if you will, schemes, as a trade tool.
Well, considering they still consider themselves a developing nation so that they can receive loans and grants from the World Bank funded by our tax dollars.
Right.
While in the same breath wanting to act like our geopolitical equals or betters. Yeah, they're willing to talk out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to what they want.
No doubt. Something else I wanted to share is that I did little research on this overnight. The GDP per capita in this country is $95,000. That's pretty amazing. China, it's $15,000. So
I was telling you yesterday, there's a whole bunch of farmers with donkeys and oxen and a wooden cart that they trade with the village next door, and that's their bubble.
I guess what the point I want to make, I'm going to make it on the other side of the break because it takes a little longer than we got going into the break here. It's Middays. We're in the Element Wealth studio just getting started. We got Congressman Michael Guest on at 12:05 today. Stay with us.
Give me back my money.
Hey, I'm here with Alex Murray of Auto Innovation.
At Auto Innovation, we want to change your car buying experience. When you're in the market for a quality pre-owned vehicle, please come see us. We want to make friends, not just customers. All eligible vehicles are inspected by a MasterTech mechanic and come with a limited powertrain warranty on us. We are located on Highway 51 in Ridgeland. Come by and see us or check out our inventory online at autoinnovation.net. Let us change your car buying experience.
Auto Innovation, Highway 51 in Ridgeland.
Well, we ran a couple of ads a couple of times and no results.
This is Clay Mance with Mansell Media. Did you know the average consumer needs to hear your message at least 8 times before taking action? And you need a strong message. Let the Mansell Media team create a compelling message backed by the best frequency to drive traffic to your business. Visit us online at mansellmedia.net. That's MANSELL media.net or call 601-990-9511.
Hello, I'm Gary Jolly from the Tractor Store. LS Tractor understands your passion for the land, and just like you, LS Tractor is committed to excellence and superior products. LS Tractor comes with a long list of standard features that are unmatched by other brands and backed with the LS commitment to provide exceptional customer service and satisfaction. You get a lot more for your money with the LS Tractor. Come to the Tractor Store in Richland to experience the LS difference. The Tractor Store in Richland.
Since 1871, Gaddis McLaurin Mercantile in downtown Bolton has been providing everything you need. Everything for your house, fencing, plumbing, flowers, lumber. Everything for your animals, dogs, cats, birds, chickens, cows, horses. And everything for your patio and yard. Bayou Classic cookers, wind chimes, Orca and Pelican coolers. We have most everything. 150 years of serving the community, family owned and operated. Gaddis McLaurin Mercantile, downtown Bolton since 1871. We'll see you soon.
This is where the story of your state gets told each day. We're proud to cover the Magnolia State like nobody else. SuperTalk, Mississippi.
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
Gerard Gibert. He keeps his classified documents right where they belong. Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s. Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk, Mississippi.
So we were talking about the GDP of this country versus that country, and so I know that it's you look at it and you say, well, just the situation with these unfair trade practices, and there's no doubt they're unfair. If you think about the tariffs they impose and all the other crazy fees, there's other stuff involved in the trade practices and just restriction of selling American goods, not just China, but other countries. You think about all that, and I know, again, a lot of people feel that we really enrich these other countries. We've borne the expense of enriching them. Except when you look at the GDP, it doesn't tell that story. Just as you said in your description of a lot of the people in China and the standard of living that they experience suggests a different story. This country by far is superior in all measurements, all economic measurements, not even close. I think they're playing with fire and using the currency as a way to engage in a trade war. But I am concerned about their willingness to really just sit tight and hold on and delay any meaningful negotiations
That's kind
end
of
it.
the corner they've backed themselves into, though, with Xi. Xi Jinping has kind of made his money as the man that stands up to America.
I agree. And as you pointed out, it's as much, if not more, about saving face and the image projected than anything. And when you don't have to worry about getting reelected, you have a tendency to just act irrationally and illogically more than anything. And I feel like that's what's going on here, especially with this playing around with the currency.
Well, irrational would be invading Taiwan to prop up their stumbling economy.
Yeah. So, but at this point, they seem to be in it for the long haul. That's what Xi Jinping is saying. The president says he has a great relationship with the communist leader. Xi, we'll see what happens. At this point, there is some degree of breakthrough. Even the EU is coming back and saying, okay, we think we're going to retaliate. You've seen that. So I think most were expecting that we'd get to some negotiating point to get a deal. So in the meantime, though, things are just uneasy and they're uncertain. They're turbulent. I saw a 20-minute interview early this morning with Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent with Maria Bartiromo on the Business Channel. And it was good. It was fascinating. And he shared his perspective. And he talked about this potential use of currency in the trade war. He warned that would be a huge mistake. And she asked him a great question. She said, corporate CEOs are saying we can't give guidance. And this has a big impact on the market. You think about investors considering deploying capital into the equities of corporations and the chief executive of the corporation, and all that's based on a future, right? That's exactly what investing is. It's some belief that in the future you'll end up with more than you put in, and that's why you're willing to take risk. And when the CEOs are saying, we can't give guidance, we can't tell you how things are going to go, we don't know. And they're saying, one thing's for sure, we're putting the clamp down on any CapEx. That's what really bothers me, because that affects everybody. And this is where people get it wrong when they say, I'm not really exposed to the stock market, I don't have any investment. No, you do, because when corporations say that are publicly traded, let's see, we're not going to do any M&A, not going to do any innovation, not going to hire any more people. We're looking at trimming expenses, and we're going to put a pause on CapEx. Well, all of that affects the entire economy, and we're all, of course, participating in the entire economy. You may have a job at a company that produces the capital equipment that these companies are now saying they're not going to buy. So that could affect your job and the performance of your company. And, of course, if you've got a retirement plan in the form of a 401k, you likely have investments in the equities of those companies that are not faring well very very well right now because they're unable to tell the investment community what they expect in the future. They're just staying pat. And so that's what the Treasury Secretary said this morning. He said that other nations are coming to the White House. They're wanting to negotiate deals. And when we get some breakthroughs there, that's going to be very positive. I agree. He also says that we're sort of resetting the economy from one that's heavily reliant, and this is good news to me, on federal spending. Lord knows we've seen too much of that, and it just didn't happen in the last 4 years. It's been going on a while where much of our economy has been too reliant on the federal largesse, and we're having to borrow money to pay for all of that spending, which is just a bad way to run the railroad, as they say. So he says that we're resetting it from one that is more reliant on the private sector investment and growth and to each other within the private sector of the economy, not the public sector. And I think that's welcome news. What we should appreciate here in Mississippi is that it likely spells the significant reduction of much of the federal money we receive that's powering our economy, that we rely on to operate a lot of the institutions and systems in our state, and all states are dealing with this. But this is the medicine we got to take, I believe, to get more in line. So his point was, we get that more in line, we cut deficits, we get a hold of inflation, all that's good news, gives some comfort to the private sector, corporate executives that are making these decisions about CapEx and M&A and expansion and hiring, et cetera. All that makes perfect sense to me. They just need some clarity. And the other thing he said that we've absolutely beat the drum on this program is getting the dang tax cuts passed. He said that again today. But he also indicated that he felt like the president was working the phones with some of those that have at this point not indicated in the House we're talking about, because the president now said, let's pass the Senate bill. He's been working the phones to garner support from the holdouts in the House. One thing that really does bother me, and I mean a lot, is that the president and some members of the Congress are signaling being open to creating a new tax bracket on all income over $1 million. A tax increase. This is not consistent with conservative Republican principle. I think it would be devastating for the economy and for the party. It's straight out of Bernie Sanders' playbook. They're going to be celebrating. Wow, we're getting those folks that make more than $1 million a year just engaged in redistribution. I heard Jay...
It almost feels like a political game of chicken, though, doesn't it?
It could be, and I hope so.
Because if you push that as, hey, this is an idea we're floating, do the people with Trump derangement syndrome then have a knee-jerk reaction and go against it, proving themselves hypocritical?
I don't know.
Or do they cheerlead the person they're claiming is the next incarnation of Hitler?
Who knows how they react? I know this. I'm going to have to come up with a new acronym, the RHINO acronym. I'm going to have to come up with one. I'll figure something out. Republicans who govern like Democrats. How about that? Can we come up?
Can we roll off?
I know we got to figure out some sequence of words where the first letter in the word makes sense for an acronym, a pronounceable acronym. This just bothers me, and even Larry Kudlow, there's no greater surrogate spokesperson from a fiscal policy perspective for the president than he. And boy, he went off on a rant about the prospect of that yesterday. And I'm with him. I totally agree. This would be devastating. And it just, because it won't stop there. What's next? Are we headed toward a point where we're relying even on fewer taxpayers in this country to power it? The idea they're saying is that you can do that, cut taxes on tips and overtime and Social Security. So that sounds like redistribution to me. We're going to tax these people over here more so we can tax these people over here less. Jamie Dimon even said he thinks we ought to double the earned income tax credit, which is nothing but pure welfare. He says we ought to double it. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. Stay with us.
Day. Bring the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. Super Talk, Mississippi.
I never meant to be so bad to you. One thing I said that I would never do. A look from you and I would fall from grace, and that would wipe the smile right from my face. Do you remember when we used to dance? And
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We got Asia bumping us into this segment. Thanks for that, Rhino. It's our pleasure to welcome now Holly Wade, Executive Director, National Federation of Independent Small Business Research Center. Holly, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so share with us the feedback you're getting from the small business community. What do they think about all these tariffs? How are they being affected?
Sure. So there's a lot of uncertainty out there. Our Small Business Optimism Index, they did step back a bit this last month in March, and a lot of that was related to kind of rethinking what sales expectations are for the next quarter. So if you're saying that they believe sales will increase rather than decrease over the next quarter, and a lot of that is just the kind of rearranging the deck chairs as far as policy priorities, and tariffs do play a part in that, as far as not quite understanding and the impact it might have on them, the size of the impact it might have on them. So a lot will be more kind of in concrete going forward, and they'll have a bit more certainty on how to best operate their business, opportunities to invest in their business, depending on how this looks as far as impacting them personally.
Okay, so I mean, what adjustments, if any, are they making now? Is this figuring into any expansion plans they might have, or capital expense investment, hiring, any risk taking, anything along those sorts? New innovation, perhaps adding new product lines, more branches, stores, all the above.
So I think you covered most of them. The small business owners, when looking, so our survey was outside of the recent announcements on increasing tariffs on, the list of countries that were revealed. And so small business owners right now, in their wait and see mode, have scaled back on investments, capital spending plans, hiring plans, things that are, costly for their business, and not knowing how things shake out in the next quarter or two. That's really putting kind of a limit on their risk as far as investing in their business. So they're holding back on a lot of investments, more than we've seen before. And that's likely how this is going to go for a while, until these impacts on the increased tariffs, start filtering through the system, and they can better understand their increased costs, how they absorb those increased costs, whether it's through, efficiency measures that they take within their business. As you mentioned, rearranging product lines, if that's available to them, or in other ways. We know that increased costs, small business owners absorb those higher costs in a lot of ways, but primarily it's through increased prices of their goods or services. And so all of that takes a bit of time to get through the system. So we'll see where they all are in the next month or two through subsequent surveys.
Have you received any reports from your members from the small, mid-sized business community where they are sharing that they've been notified from suppliers that costs are going up, be that on material inputs or inventory for resale?
Yes, we certainly have heard from small business owners who were initially impacted by the steel and aluminum tariffs, the 20% on Chinese import tariffs. And so if they're importing those products, they have seen those prices increase as far as input prices into their business. And even some have seen prices increase in anticipation of the tariffs that we've now seen and were announced last week. So, kind of a variety of ways that they've been experiencing these higher prices because of the tariffs, whether they were already being enforced and enacted or their vendors or suppliers were in anticipation starting to ratchet up prices on their goods and input costs.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, perhaps from the supply chain perspective, how this might affect consumers at the retail level. That seems to be a bit unknown and uncertain at this point, but I think virtually everybody expects they're going to see the price of much of what they buy increase.
Yes, for small business owners, the process of repricing their goods and service, it's a concern of whether they can stay competitive, either with their larger counterparts or with others in their industry that may be sourcing those goods from other countries that might have a lower tariff on them. So all of that, navigating how they're going to move forward based on who they're supplying or who they're sourcing for their supplies and inventories is it's a bit complicated. It's time consuming. It's stressful. And so there's this level of uncertainty right now of how that all plays out in the next month or two so that small business owners can keep supplying what their customers are looking for in the ways that they can at a competitive price.
Yeah. Do they think in that sort of range of business size that this makes them less competitive, perhaps at a competitive disadvantage to the larger retailers in the retail sector, that is?
Sure. So, this has always been one of those challenges for small business owners in that, they're offering a kind of a different set of circumstances for their consumers, that personal relationship with their with the owner, with the manager of the business, and having that direct contact to best talk through what they might need or better products to solve their issues. Say, for instance, at a hardware store, going into a local hardware store versus going into Home Depot, very different experience. But likely you're paying a bit of a premium going into the local hardware store, depending on what the type of products that they're offering. So there's a bit of difference in that context, and that will likely carry through with the tariffs. One of the areas that might be a bit more difficult, or is a bit more difficult for small business owners, is trying to navigate different suppliers if they're out there that they can take advantage of, that larger businesses have, an army of people trying to figure this out for them. So small businesses, it is a bit more stressful on their end because the owner is having to navigate all this themselves, and that takes a lot of time and kind of discovery work to figure out how to best operate and what options might be available to them.
Are there any that have shared with you, we're not going to survive this? We just don't have the staying power and the wherewithal to endure this, or maybe there's a time period that they can survive, but after that they're just can't.
Sure. So, depending on how, what the products are that they're selling and where they're getting those products from, will depend on how they can move forward or adjust business operations. We've just going through the pandemic. That was one shock of trying to figure out how to adjust business operations to keep the doors open. For a lot of them, this might be another big shock to try and figure out and navigate how to keep the doors open again. So a lot of small business owners have been through a very tumultuous time over the last 5 years. And, this is going to be a lot of uncertainty at the beginning, trying to navigate these very kind of turbulent waters as far as policy shifts. And then, trying to figure out how to adjust accordingly. So, there will be small business owners who are more impacted than others. But, we're here to try to help them figure out how to best move forward.
What's the general position, if there is one, that your organization is taking, Holly, with respect to these policies?
Well, in about a half hour, we have a webinar to better explain in kind of an information webinar to go through what the new announcements are, what they mean for businesses, what they can do to look through contracts, talk with their vendors, some really kind of practical measures to help them navigate through these tariffs. But also, small business owners, they're looking for a more friendly regulatory environment more generally. They want those tax provisions made permanent that are going to expire at the end of the year. So, Congress and the administration can go a long way to help with some of the uncertainty and alleviate some risk of higher costs in those areas also.
Got it. Holly, thanks for coming on. Enjoyed the discussion. Holly Wade, Executive Director, NFIB Research Center. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth studio.
Hey, this is Bob, and
Days with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk, Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
Jungle Love, the Steve Miller Band. That's a good one there. Appreciate that. So, Wall Street is cutting growth forecasts in China. How the heck do they even figure it out, given how duplicitous they tend to be with respect to any information that comes out of the regime, honestly? Also, some talk. Bartiromo Maria asked this question of the Treasury Secretary if the administration would consider delisting Chinese companies and disallowing Chinese companies to be listed on American exchanges. Wow, that's a huge deal. So you see what's going on here. We're having this war that's in the financial realm, sort of a proxy for an all-out, real military-style war, it feels like. I mean, we've been at odds for a while, let's be honest. They view us as their mortal enemy. I think most people in this country would want peace, want stability. I certainly would like to see some resolution to this trade war. I think that's what most people want, and I think the best scenario would be 0% tariffs all the way around. I'd like to see that. Make their markets totally open to ours and ours to theirs. The problem, of course, we have is their ability to, and willingness more than anything, to produce stuff super, super cheap. Because they don't pay anybody anything. It's just little to no labor cost involved. And what makes this hard, Rhino, if you think about it, is you're trying to negotiate a trade deal with people who are irrational, without any regard for human life whatsoever. They've proven that. It's expendable, disposable, acceptable losses, I think is the terminology often used. So that's problematic, in my view. The Walmart CEO says, we can't give you any quarterly forecasts. Scrapped it. Wow. This is in a news release, just came out. It did maintain, it's talking about the next quarter, it did maintain that first quarter outlook 3 to 4% growth, which is good for the giant retailer. But the tariffs, of course, are going to impact them particularly hard, as much of what they retail in their stores, products that are made in China. So we'll definitely see where all that goes. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon also said this morning he thinks that we're likely headed to a recession. He also said that in his discussions with lots of corporate CEOs who are his customers, they're indicating to him they believe we're already in one. So it just really, I think it depends on your point of view on that. We did get a couple of folks that sent us in some suggestions for an acronym. I said earlier that those Republicans who are now supporting the idea of increasing or creating a new tax bracket for all income over $1 million, they're talking about 41%. All income over $1 million. So the top rate right now, 36.9, I believe. That would be higher than the rate was in the Obama administration for the highest bracket. I think this was a terrible, terrible idea, and it basically means now Republicans stand for tax increases. That's what it means to me. And we're talking about income tax increases, but selective. We're not talking about, I know people may say, well, we did that here in Mississippi when we increased the excise tax on fuel. That applies to everybody. We're talking about selective. We're going to raise taxes on this group of people and lower it on this group of people from an income tax perspective. And that would be, I think, very negative. So the suggestion is RADS, Republicans Acting Democrat. We got that both from Dave and someone else on the 662 on the C-Spire text line. John and Pontotoc said Dumblikins. Thomas in Greenwood says they're going to raise taxes on high earners. Write it on the wall. You know what concerns me most of all, Thomas, is the number of people who would profess to be conservative in small government, low taxes, that will support this. That's what's going to bother me. Oh, doesn't affect me. I don't make $1 million. I'm fine with that. That means they're going to lower taxes for me by raising taxes on them. Yeah, I'm cool with that. That would be a concern. That would tend to place us more in line with the left in this country. And I mean, that's policy that they fully support. It's just redistribution, socialism. We're coming right back after Fox News and SuperTalk News with more of Middays. Congressman Michael Guest at 12:05.
Hour of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. Hello? You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio on this
Hump Day.
Are you thinking about or planning for retirement? Do you have a plan? Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income, growth, and guarantees. The C Spire text line is open. It's 601-879-4395. Also, Middays and Sports Talk Mississippi will be at the Columbus Convention and Visitors Bureau tomorrow at the annual Catfish in the Alley event that features Southern flavor, the blues, and history. So, yeah, it's definitely being reported that the president told Republican senators he's open to raising taxes on the highest earners. This certainly would dispel the talking points from the left that his tax plan was all about the wealthy in this country. Now, I disagree with the president on this. I'm not for that. Not for raising taxes in that way whatsoever. And I do think that would have a negative impact on the economy. And I just think it conflicts with the principles and the values of conservatism. And you'd like to think Republicans are part of that. So that's the situation right now. Also, it does appear, according to Secretary of the Treasury, that you got North Korea, South Korea, and China. No, not China, pardon me. Japan headed this way to negotiate on planes, headed over. That'd be good. Also, a key supplier to Apple, a Chinese-based company that provides certain material inputs to the production of Apple devices, Luxshare. They actually assemble, this is a different company, they assemble iPhones and they make AirPods. They are reconsidering their investments in China as the trade war plays out, and considering relocating to this country. That'd be interesting if that were to happen. And Apple's up today, Rhino, pretty good, at a pretty good clip. I wonder if it's related to that news, because that is a concern that the production of iPhones with a tariff would be considerably more expensive. And perhaps seeing this news that this Chinese supplier to Apple is strongly considering relocating to this country. Of course, this would be a Chinese company in this country, operating in this country. Don't know how folks feel about that. But last I checked, Apple was up at a pretty good clip today, right? $6-7 a share. So that's interesting that that's coming across. We shall see. But this is part of what the president, that was his plan. That's what he wanted. And hopefully that will come to fruition. I think that'd be good news. It'd be great to see, more announcements of companies say, yeah, we're going to avoid these crazy tariffs. We're relocating to the United States. That would be magnificent news. And should that happen, I think we would be off to the races. There's no doubt about it. Have you noticed that Elon Musk has been, he's vanished somewhat? Hadn't seen a lot of him other than attacking.
He's been active on social media, but he hasn't made many public appearances. Yeah,
Peter Navarro, he took him to task, that he, the architect of the Trump tariff strategy, and a former Democrat is Navarro. And he's an interesting character, but Musk, he took him to task on the whole trade deal, on the tariff strategy. Navarro snapped back at him, of course. But, if you think about it, he's not having a good couple of weeks, Elon Musk, Rhino. He spent $200 million of his own dough to get Trump elected, but he's lost about $100 billion as a result of, think about that. On paper, of course, his net worth, $100 billion. Spent $200 million. He spent $20 million of his own money on that Supreme Court justice race in Wisconsin and was defeated. So his money really didn't pay off there.
But on the flip side of that, even with all the attacks on Teslas are still the most popular EV, and SpaceX is still the only reliably consistent space platform available, especially commercially.
That's correct. And I think, and he's got more investing and more riding on mainstreaming autonomous vehicles, arguably, than any other company. He's made that clear. That and robots, human-like robots, is where the future of his company, the value of his company is. And investors are counting on him making those inventions materialize.
I think he might also become a bigger player in the telecom industry as Starlink continues to advance and continues to be a more cost-efficient way to get broadband internet to places that are not in urban areas.
Agree, except he's got some competition there from Amazon. You've seen they've made announcements that they're pursuing the same line of business. And so I think it's great.
How are Amazon going to get their satellites up?
I don't know, but I don't. I hear you, but
he's got a pretty big head start.
They do, but I don't discount the ability of a company of that size, scope, magnitude that was built to that level in such a relatively short period of time to get to a $600 billion revenue clip per year. But that's what we've seen, right? And we all benefit, by the way, when that happens.
And Musk will benefit. If he's having to take Amazon satellites up, he's still going to get a cut.
If that's the case, absolutely right. But that we're not sure if that's the sole source of transport at that point. But this is what often happens when you've got novel technology like that. You get somebody that's out front, and they have the lead, and they dominate, and they've got somewhat of an exclusive market for a short period of time. Then the window closes, because somebody else says, wait, there's money in that. And they come up with a way to do it. And we consumers benefit from that. That's been the case for a long, long time. And this country provides the greatest opportunity for that dynamic scenario that I just described. And I disagree with people who are saying we got to fix it. It's broke. Fix what exactly? What are they talking about? What's broke? I see it as more opportunity than ever to achieve significant economic status in this country because of the massive amount of tools that we've created that are available to everybody at an affordable cost. And over the last couple of decades, 3 decades, all available to all of us, again, at an affordable price. So take advantage and leverage those tools to create your own wealth. A lot of people are doing that right now. Let's check the C Spire text line. I saw that Mo sent something in just a minute ago. I wanted to get that. Yeah, concerning Trump and tax increases, he may be trying to bridge the gap between the left and the right to get his agenda passed. So, Mo, you compromise your principles to get an agenda passed? I mean, it's I don't see how else you paint that. Oh, in this particular case, it's okay to raise taxes even though we're the party of lower taxes so we can get Democrats on board, which I don't think they would anyhow. I don't think putting a tax increase in place or a new tax bracket on all income over $1 million is not going to move the needle with respect to Democrats supporting this agenda. Not one iota. I thought Amazon used the Postal Service to deliver their package. Does USPS have packages? Does the USPS have rockets? Now, they do have a contract with the United States Postal Service in some areas for certain package delivery, and they take advantage of some. I remember looking that up, heck, on the program here well over a year ago. There's some law in place, I don't remember it exactly, that requires the Postal Service to offer those services to Amazon at a very low price. The president's actually talked about that. He'd like to end that, but that would require changing law. That means 60 votes in the Senate. That's something else. You've seen a lot of people say the Congress ought to be busy codifying a lot of what the president enacted through executive order. The problem there is you got to have 60 votes in the Senate for that. You can't pass that sort of stuff on simple majorities through the reconciliation rules. You can you have some latitude with respect to policy when it is related to spending, and even that's limited, and revenue, and that's what they're trying to do right now is craft a reconciliation package or a budget package that can pass through reconciliation. I call it a reconciliation package. They're referring to that in those terms as well in some cases. Time for a break. Coming right back on Middays in the Element Wealth studio.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. So have you seen this? The president is talking about possibility, open to the possibility of deporting American citizens or placing them, incarcerating them outside of the country. Check me out on that. I thought that was interesting. I don't know what that would look like, and I don't have really all the details, but signals from the White House along those lines where that's kind of interesting, where we would incarcerate American citizens in other countries.
Yeah, apparently it was a question brought up during the daily briefing yesterday with White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt.
Okay.
She mentioned Donald Trump's, quote, idea to potentially deport, quote, violent and heinous, end quote, U.S. citizens, with the caveat, if it's legal.
Okay.
Which it's not.
Right. I don't think it is. But that would be an interesting approach to incarceration of our most violent offenders. American citizens that we would incarcerate abroad, outside of the borders of this country. That would be certainly a new idea for sure. No doubt about that. My concern about China is just how long will they hold off? It's just that they just sit, long haul, play the long game, just hold firm with their position. That would be a concern. I hope there's a breakthrough. Now, other countries, however, are reporting that they're waiting for a reply, that the White House hasn't responded yet, that there's a lack of engagement at this point. The Philippines, United Kingdom, two countries that say, yeah, we pitched a framework on a trade deal and haven't received a reply, any response to those suggestions. So it's being reported that there are no officials in the Trump administration that have a mandate to negotiate. And that may be why, that at this point they're just taking in, I guess, offers, suggestions, proposals, and really not acting or responding. And hopefully that happens soon, because that would get us a resolution. On the C Spire text line, Johnny in West Point asks, if we went to zero tariffs across the board, what would keep the companies from not going to another country for cheaper labor? Yeah, something that was brought up yesterday, Johnny, said it's hard to understand exactly what the goal is, because you've heard it stated that, well, we want to impose tariffs that are in line or now actually higher than other countries impose on this country to generate revenue to the Treasury. Estimated as much as $600 billion a year. It's currently at about 50. So that would be 12x. Now remember, all those tariffs are paid by American companies. They're not paid by the foreign nations. And I think the average person on the street, if you asked them, in fact, I've seen a couple of interviews, you may have seen it as well, Every one of them gets it wrong. Yeah, the other countries are paying those tariffs, and they don't. It's paid by American importers. But you do wonder if we achieved tariff rate parity. You charge us, call it 5%, we charge you 5%. It seems like at that point the motivation to relocate manufacturing into this country would be diminished. And because, okay, well, we have parity, and I'm not dealing with these really stiff tariffs. We've negotiated reasonable rates. So then that aspect of the goal, of the objective, wouldn't be achieved. That in order to really motivate these companies like pharmaceuticals, and there's some other products as well that are, I think, critical to our national security. I'm not worried about toys and tennis shoes, honestly, but pharmaceuticals and perhaps semiconductors, that's a concern, no doubt. We're heavily relying on that. We learned, right, during COVID what kind of exposure we had. Would they be inclined to relocate if we achieve tariff rate parity and there's really no stiff cost associated with the continuation of manufacturing in other countries? So I don't know. That's a question that's really unanswerable at this point. We'll see where it goes. And that makes you wonder, okay, if we do get tariff rate parity or suggestions or proposals for that, would our country act accordingly and agree to a similar rate if it means that we're not going to cause companies to reshore over here? So I'm not sure.
I think a part of that calculation would be the economic response in those different countries, because if you have a country that relies heavily on the tariff input on their balance sheet, then they're going to have to rework their economy, potentially raising corporate tax or income tax or something like that would obviously be in the calculation as to whether or not it would be cost effective to manufacture in that country.
All the above, absolutely. It's a financial exercise is what it is. It's a modeling exercise they'd have to go through. I'm just not sure. All I'm saying is I do feel like there's a bit of a conflict between we want higher tariff rates to generate revenue, and that only happens if the manufacturing stays in those countries. But we want them to come back to this country and make stuff here, in which case there wouldn't be any tariff revenue. That's all I'm saying. So there's a bit of a conflict there, and maybe it's a combination of the two. I wouldn't count on a lot of tariff revenue if I were the Congress. I wouldn't count on a lot of that in doing their budget negotiations and doing their budget planning, is what I would say. Unions are no longer sustainable on the 662. There's no doubt that the price of labor in this country is dramatically higher than it is in other countries. We have benefited from the fact that other countries will sell their labor to us cheap. And what I mean by that is all the stuff we buy in the stores that's made by their extremely cheap labor, it keeps costs down. I mean, it makes costs of the goods we consume here lower than if they were made here by expensive union labor. That's why I believe if we start reshoring manufacturing companies that they would be highly automated and you wouldn't have workers standing shoulder to shoulder on a factory floor making stuff. I don't think that would be the case. There would be massive opportunity in the design, the development, the installation, the support, and maintenance of all of that sophisticated production technology. No doubt about that. And that's where we could produce a lot of wealth. David from Bruce says, why can't they make Indians that have gas stations and hotels pay taxes that will build a lot of revenue to the USA? They pay taxes. They're not exempt from taxes. These are folks that are operating businesses legally here in this country, many of whom, I think most of whom, are American citizens. So they're subject to the same rules, regulations, and taxation.
I'm reminded of Terry Pratchett's Economic Theory of Boots. You ever heard that one?
I haven't.
Where he talks about how the wealthy stay wealthy and the poor stay poor based on the price of boots. Where a really good pair of boots will cost you $50, but an affordable pair of boots is like $10.
Right.
And that $50 pair of boots will last you several years, whereas that $10 pair of boots will last you a season or two, and then you got to buy another $10 pair of boots.
Right.
And in the lifespan of the $50 pair of boots, you wind up spending $100 on the cheap boots.
Yeah. I mean, it's consumer decisions would adjust accordingly. CC in Senatobia says, might as well call it the new taxi hotel bracket. Who doesn't like that? You go make a bunch of money so we can have it. Yay. Yeah, I'm afraid that's become kind of a popular position. I'm not going to call it populist. I'm going to call it popular. I don't care. More money for me and it costs you more money, that's fine.
It doesn't become populist until it's tied to a cut on income tax for under $150,000.
Yeah. And
you tie it to that, then it's pretty much by definition populist.
That's true. And there's also something else that's kind of disturbing about, oh man, the Gen Z and the extent to which they're behind Luigi Mangione, and they're all mad because of DOJ. He's the guy, of course, that assassinated the United Healthcare CEO. The DOJ is seeking the death penalty, it looks like, and they're all mad about that. And now have you seen this? There's even an act. Is it in California? The Luigi Mangione Act. It's got an act named after him that would prevent health insurance companies from denying medical care to patients. And polls show that a lot of people in this country support the idea of assassinating others. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Okay, is everybody ready? I'm ready. Ready here. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
It's been such a long time. I think I should be going, yeah. And time doesn't wait for me. It keeps on rolling.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. Little Boston bumping us into this segment. Boy, does that take me back. 1976.
Mike from Madison on the C Spire text line had a question about the Terry Pratchett economic theory of boots. It was $50 boots. Normal pair is like $500 to $800.
Yeah, they are expensive.
In fairness, the time frame when that book was written was the early 90s. I think it was 93 when Terry Pratchett wrote that book. So $50 boots makes a little more sense in the early 90s.
Gotcha. On the C Spire text line, why can't we just outlaw certain of those things to be imported? All of your list and more, the way we don't accept electric cars from China. We certainly could. We could just say, look, we're not buying your stuff anymore. They would, of course, say we're not buying your stuff anymore. And the American agricultural industry in particular would suffer greatly. The state of Mississippi would collapse financially, virtually, if China were not an agricultural trading partner. That would cause enormous hardship. I mean, there are numerous forms of trade wars. There's no doubt about it. There's still a lot of things that are made in China that we import that are parts and pieces and components of other goods that we consume here. So if we didn't allow those products to come into this country, a lot of what we consume, which are American, produced by American-based companies that just happen to use components and parts and materials that come from other countries, including China. We've got to get to a resolution. I'm optimistic that we will. Let's see, Ben from Madison, I think, sent us a question on that. Want to get to that. He said, what do you think the end game is with these tariffs? I feel like we are getting contradicting messages from the administration. I share your concern, Ben, and that's why I pointed out a minute ago, is the objective tariff revenue? Is it reshoring? Is it a combination of the two? Because the president said we're all going to be rich pretty soon. He said that yesterday. I am glad to see that he is relaxing restrictions and regulations on coal. We had an event at the White House yesterday, had a bunch of coal miners in the White House, in the room there where the briefing was occurring. He had about 30 or so of them assembled behind him. It was pretty neat, all dressed in their typical work clothing with their hard hats on. He called it beautiful coal. So, and we haven't a lot of it in this country. We are flush with coal and natural gas, enormously blessed, and we do need to put it to work. Now, the price of oil, by the way, is getting in that range where it becomes difficult for the energy companies to even produce a profit. Price of oil down, last I checked, Rhino, this morning, in that $55 a barrel range. Another $4 or so drop today. Your old funny money's up 77,000, up about 1,000. So you should see that translate into lower prices, hopefully at the pump. And that's almost exclusively driven by the expectation of a decline in demand. $57 today. It was 55 and change earlier, oil. Decline in demand as a result of the expectation of a recession. Wilson in Greenwood says maybe use Medicare formulary with regard to U.S. manufactured drugs before being preferred to create incentive for pharmaceutical manufacturers. Yeah, I mean, you could do that. They would cost more. We have to be honest, a lot more, which means the cost of Medicare would go up, and that would also mean that our deficit and debt would rise. But it takes a while. You can't just snap your fingers and start making drugs in this country. Unfortunately, for a long time, a good bit of that has shifted overseas, so there's some time involved in that. Can we endure it? You know, how much pain are you willing to accept for how long to get through this thing? That's going to become more of a political issue, of course. Yeah, so I misspoke a little bit a minute ago about the lack of response coming from the White House, and it was prompted by Mike from Columbus, who sent a very reasonable text when I said that, you know, some of these countries are expressing frustration that they're not getting any feedback from the White House. He said it takes a while to prove proposals. I don't want the president to just stamp offers. Hopefully the experts and advisors will spend time evaluating. So I went and researched it in a little deeper. And so what we're hearing from these other countries is that they're requesting meetings, that they, tendered a very high level kind of tariff rate, and that's about it, or signaled a willingness to negotiate. But they say at least that they've requested meetings, because, the White House is saying our phone's ringing off the hook with people wanting meetings, and it could just be they're overwhelmed with that. But 70, you would think there'd be enough people in the administration to deal with 70 countries request, but apparently they're saying they're reporting, are these other countries, we're not even getting any response from the White House to our request for a meeting. So that's a little different scenario. Thanks for pointing that out, Mike. And I agree, we don't want to go haphazard through the negotiating process. I'm quite sure that there are a bunch of smart people available to the president and the administration to work through these trade deals. And in fact, one of them was on the Hill yesterday, right, Rhino? Testifying. Can't remember the individual's name, but man, Senator Tom Tillis got a bit indignant with that individual when he said, if this works out, it's great, but if it doesn't, whose neck do I wring? That's what Republican Senator Tom Tillis said. I think a lot of people feel that way, is that, man, if this works out, we're off to the races, and it's going to be incredible. If it doesn't, and China says, we got 100 years or so to wait this out, that could be problematic.
I don't think they have anything close to that.
No, but they got a lot more time than we do, is my opinion. They have more time than we do politically.
Yes. Economically, not even close.
Agreed.
And politically, they only have power if people have jobs.
I agree. But, again, they don't mind if people die as a result of this. You'd have to agree with that. They don't care. Human life means nothing, has no value to them. That gives them a lot more time than it does us. If for example, they just said, okay, we're not going to let any antibiotics out of this country, right? Didn't we all learn that during COVID, that we were so dead-gum reliant on the production of certain pharmaceuticals, namely antibiotics during COVID, because that's what we all sought to fight infection, that if they just said we're not letting those out of the country, then people in this country start dying. That ain't very popular.
And I would imagine if they pulled a stunt like that, the response would be possibly outrageous to some, to the extent of seizing Chinese-owned farmland, the expulsion of Chinese students on visas.
Agree. I think it'd be a military response. I don't want to see that. Nobody wants to see that, I don't think. But
I don't think just the antibiotics would jump to that level.
It may not. But right now, all we know is they're saying we're not talking. That's what their current position and posture is. Yeah. Let's see here. What else? If I was, Dan, it says, I was being facetious about Amazon, but the satellite broadband y'all were talking about, they have announced their intention to enter that market. They won't be the last. There'll be others as well. And that's good for us. Consumers win when there's more availability of options and competition. So that's all good stuff. Why are you guys still amazed by sore losers? Didn't expect violence. Violence, that's being paid for. I told Paul this for years. Interview the people renting the buses and the people painting the signs. Track the money. I'm not really sure how that figures into now a survey that said 38% of respondents said it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Donald Trump, and 31% said the same about Elon Musk. And this all stems from this Luigi Mangione deal. Oh, wait, we can just murder people to get what we want.
I think what they're saying is, do you expect anything less when the media has justified violence?
Totally agree.
When it appears the government was funding NGOs that promoted violence.
Completely agree. Yeah, absolutely. No, I expect nothing less, and I do think that they're right, that Kyle in Indianola here is right, that, when you have political leaders in particular that seem to be hesitant to condemn the assassination of a person, I agree. That's a problem. And condoning violence and all the crap we saw during the BLM riots, absolutely. Coming right back in the Element Well studio.
It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Well, that's a classic from the Eagles there, isn't it? Fantastic. Greg in Newton, Mississippi says, Congresswoman Smith was talking on the morning show about how hard they are working. I would sleep better if I thought that was true. I'm trying to think of who that would be. Who would that Congresswoman?
Cindy Hyde Smith.
Oh, that would be Senator Cindy Hyde Smith. Yeah. Oh, I think she was on the program this morning. That's right. Thank you for pointing that out. Crosby Simmons says in Invert, a good analogy is in a football game. The defense is the world, and offense, U.S., and 6 quarterbacks line up and start slinging the ball in all directions. Nobody's sure what's going on. That's a good one, Crosby. Let's see. This is interesting on the 601 C-Spire text line. Just as we can be energy independent, we should become manufacturing independent. If we do, then we would not be relying on other countries so much. Yes, there are barriers to that, but it could be done if the government would get out of the way. And I run a Mississippi manufacturer that gets about 10% of product from China, even though I don't want to because those parts are not available here. Would you pay double for them, though? That's a question, JP, if that were the case. So I hear you. But this is why I asked a question, Rhino, of Mike McCormick on our show Monday, was do we produce more agriculturally than we can consume in this country? I knew the answer. I wanted to hear it from him. We do. We can't consume everything we produce. We rely on the other countries to buy what we produce. I know this state does big time. We ship a lot of our farm yield overseas to overseas customers or foreign customers because Mexico and Canada are huge consumers and buyers of our product. So I don't think it's a situation as it was 150 years ago, 200 years ago, where you just attempt to make the minimum amount you need, and you struggle to do that, honestly, to supply your own citizenry, your own population. That's one of the reasons this country's gotten wealthy, is because we do produce. We're so productive in everything, from agriculture to everything else we make. And you got to think services, too, because the vast majority of our economy, our GDP, is services. And we export a lot of services. All you got to do is look at the internet. Look at Amazon and AWS and all the other explosion you've seen in cloud services and software and artificial intelligence. That's all being sold globally. If those companies only deliver those services within our borders, unemployment here would spike considerably because there's a lot of people involved in the production, the creation, the design, the development, the delivery, the support of those services. I think we discount just how much our economy has transitioned, and that's a good thing. That's why we're wealthier. That's why our GDP is $95,000 per capita compared to $50,000 in Germany, which you would consider to be a very advanced country. But we're almost double them because they don't have that. It's also why, as we've talked about, the EU, every single day they're looking for some angle to attack American technology companies, every dang day, to make it harder, if not impossible, or drag them into court and all that kind of crap. He says he'd be willing to pay 100% more for those products. Would you absorb those costs, or would you pass them on to your customers? Just an interesting thought question there. And on energy independence, we've been through that before. I think most people view energy independence around oil. That's what they think, not the entire matrix of energy. We have a wide variety of energy sources in this country besides just oil. The fact is, we do not produce enough oil in this country, never have, as we consume. We produce right now about 13 million barrels a day, and we consume about just under 19 million barrels a day. And it's the highest ever in our history. It was about 11 million average during the first Trump administration. It's currently 13 million a day. I know that surprises a lot of people. We've actually increased. Now, I believe we would have increased it more had Biden not got in office and reversed the Trump energy policy. We were on track to be probably in the 14.5, 15 million barrel a day range were it not for Biden, who came in and said, yeah, we're going to kill the fossil fuels industry. We also do not have the refining capacity, and we won't. If we started building refineries today to meet to supply our needs within our borders, 10 years before we get to that, minimum. And I don't think you're going to see that. And no energy company has really stepped up to the plate and said, yeah, we're going to invest billions upon billions in building new refineries. Knowing that, you just don't know where policy's going. There's no stability and consistency there. And they could end up just eating a lot of investment in a refinery. And then we have the chemical problem of the grade of oil we extract from the ground and the grade of oil our refineries can actually turn into usable fuel. We're stepping aside for a break. It's time for Fox News and SuperTalk News. It's Congressman Michael Guest after that.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transmission now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It is Middays. We are live in the Element Wealth studio. The afternoon portion is now with you on this
Hump Day.
It's our pleasure to welcome now Congressman Michael Guest. He represents, of course, Mississippi's 3rd Congressional District. Congressman, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, Gerard. Great to talk to you again.
All right, so give us a skinny. We're watching, been talking about this morning. You got a bill that came over for the Senate to put together a budget package and hopefully pass something through both houses, send it to the president for signature. It includes extension or perhaps making permanent the Trump tax cuts. It's our understanding the president's been working the phones to persuade some of your colleagues in the House there to get on board that maybe have some concerns.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and I think the president has been successful. That bill is right now supposed to hit the floor late this afternoon.
Okay.
The concerns around that bill, Gerard, is the House worked extremely hard to pass our budget instructions. We included in there what we thought was very targeted spending for the border, for some immigration reform, and for the military. We tried to, as much as possible, offset the tax cuts with cuts in spending. We put in there the budget resolution that passed the House originally, a $1.5 to $2 trillion cut. We had a lower debt ceiling to try to keep spending under control. And so we worked extremely hard putting together what we thought was a great blueprint. We sent it over to the Senate. The Senate got it, and the Senate said, well, what we're going to do is instead of marrying up what we want to do with the House, we're going to send some instructions back that says the House can continue to work on those increase in savings, but we're going to pass a budget resolution that's going to spend more money, that's only going to have $4 billion in savings versus a $1.5 to $2 trillion and a higher debt ceiling. And so, as you can imagine, that has caused some concern with House members and the fact that the Senate would not agree to the plan that we had worked so hard on, that the numbers were so skewed, particularly in the savings portion of the budget resolution. And so that is what has caused this to kind of slow down this week. But the president has assured all members of the House that when the final package comes out, that it's going to look much closer to what the House is asking for versus the language put in by the Senate.
Okay.
And so that has caused some people who had concerns now to come back around. But this is the first step to unlock the process. We've got to make sure that we match up and we pass the same legislation that passed out of the Senate. And it is very likely that legislation will pass later today.
Okay. Well, all right. Appreciate that update. That's good. That's good information there. So, I thought it was almost a joke, Congressman, when I saw the Senate's measure had a $4 billion floor on spending adjustments, and just to once again clarify for our audience, we're talking about over 10 years. These budget packages, all these measures that deal with financial aspects of government spending and also revenue, they're always scored over a 10-year period, is the way the CBO does. It's also the way the Senate parliamentarian scores it to consider it for eligibility to pass through simple majority. But $4 billion, that's nothing over 10 years.
Yeah. That's right. That is nothing but a rounding error in the federal government over a 10-year window. And so we, as conservatives in the House, we were disappointed that the Senate would not commit to more savings. because what we don't want to do is we don't want to continue to overload debt. We don't want to continue to increase borrowing as we look to extend the tax cuts. We want it as much as possible to make sure that they're paid for either through spending cuts or through what we believe will be future growth in the economy. And that's why we were so adamant that we put in there what we thought were reasonable numbers that actually people could look at it and understand. And the Senate pulled all those numbers out and, again, put that very low ball figure in the number that they sent back. And so that is the reason this has kind of been held up over the last couple of days is because of what the Senate sent back to us over the weekend.
Okay. Well, do you think we'll get a deal that will get to the president's desk this month? I heard, I think it may have been Senator Cornyn. It could have been Senator Thune even said it, kind of maybe a June time frame, and that was rather disconcerting.
The Speaker's timeline is if we can get the budget resolution, if we can get it passed and sent to the president this week, that even though we're going to be out next week, the week leading up to Easter, that the committees of jurisdiction will begin writing up those spending increases and the spending cuts in hopes that as we move into early next month in May when we're here, that we can either get a bill completely across the finish line or that we can make great progress during the 3 months that we're going to be here in the month of May. And so that is the Speaker's timeline. It is somewhat ambitious, but he hopes to have something out of the House by end of May, sending it over to the Senate in June, where they have a much more lengthy process that they have to go through procedurally to get the bill on the floor and to get the votes that they need.
All right, let's talk about the balance of power. So we just had special elections in Florida, retained both of those seats. So where do we stand now with a difference of 9? Do I have that right? That we could lose 4?
So we have we have actually a 4-vote majority right now.
Okay.
So we can lose 4 votes and still pass legislation with the 2 pickups in Florida. And look, the thing about those 2 seats is in those both of those congressional districts, we were outspent in one district 10-1, being the Democrats dumped $10 million into a race that Republicans spent $1 million. In the other race, it was a 7-1 difference, and we still won both of those seats by roughly 15 points.
Wow.
And so the Democrats were really trying to, I think, make a push to try to make those numbers much closer or maybe pull off an upset. They were unsuccessful in doing so. And I think it just goes to show, that the president and that this administration is still extremely popular. People, I think, trust the president. They trust the president that he's going to make the right decisions for the country. And they're willing to kind of walk with the president, particularly along, what we've seen over the last week or so with the tariff situation.
Yeah, I think that's right. And talk about that. We got about 3 minutes till the break, and if you can hang around, we can keep talking on the other side. But the tariffs, of course, that's been front and center in Washington. The president announcing his strategy, his plans last Wednesday there at the White House on the lawn. And, the reaction's been somewhat mixed, even among Republicans. The White House reports some 70 countries have reached out to negotiate deals. What are your thoughts at this point?
I think the president, is using the tariffs to try to renegotiate a lot of the trade deals that we've seen. And look, the markets have reacted negatively. I see the markets are back up today, but since then, we've seen just a huge loss in the financial markets. But as long as these trade disputes, these tariffs, as long as they are short-term, Gerard, somewhere between 60 to 90 days, and we're able to renegotiate more favorable trade terms with many of these countries, I think what we're going through right now would be something that the American people, when we get to the other side, will say, well, it was worth that short-term pain because the markets have recovered, the price of goods have gone back down, I think it becomes problematic if this becomes a long-term trade war. If we get into the situation to where, 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now, that many of these tariffs are still in place, that Americans then really begin to feel it in their pocketbook, having to pay our higher cost every time that they go out to purchase goods and services. I think at that point, that's when you're going to start seeing or hearing more feedback from the rank and file American public.
I think you're exactly right. I think everybody is willing to make some sacrifices to try to reset this situation and eliminate these disparities. But if it endures, it becomes a problem for a lot of Americans, and it becomes a political problem. We got a break. Can you hang around? Keep talking?
Yes, sir. I would love to. Thank you.
Great. We got Congressman Michael Guest on the line with us. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Delis.
Check it out. Let's do this. The talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Let's get on with it.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
The blues has got a hold of me. I believe I'm getting dizzy.
We're back with you in the Element Wealth studio. We're visiting with Congressman Michael Guest. So the congressman just informed us that he expects that they'll be working out more details on the framework of a budget package. And so you were talking about just the willingness of the American public to just be patient. I think we'd have to also agree, Congressman, that also applies to getting the Trump tax cuts extended or hopefully made permanent. Clarity there would be huge for our economy because right now there's still concern about that.
You're right. I think, Gerard, that if we get to this summer, if Congress can extend the tax cuts permanently and maybe even expand some of those cuts. I mean, the president has campaigned on no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and so there's some other additional tax incentives that we want to look to try to see if we can find a way to include those in the package that we're going to ultimately put forward. That as you begin to roll back the tariffs that the president has put in place, I mean, I think you could see an incredible explosion within the economy. And I think that, what we've seen is a huge market overreaction. I see now as we're speaking, it looks like the Dow's up 1,400 points.
Let me interrupt you there, Congressman. That's because, Rhino, check us out on this. On the television and studio here, it says that the president has announced a 90-day pause on tariffs. That's why the markets are going crazy right now. That's on the channel right now in the studio. Rhino shaking his head. So, but remember, this happened a couple of days ago, and it turned out to be fake news. That's why the markets ran up and then closed down.
The markets were up, and then they were back down.
2,000 points in about 3 hours. They swung. So, but this looks real. I mean, this is being reported. I'm watching the reporters on Fox Business. They're all on their phones, reading the notifications. So
as we're on right now,
exactly
breaking news.
That's happening right now.
White House with Trump announcing a pause.
Yeah,
and look, this just goes to show, that the president, he has the best interest of the American people at heart. He wants to see our economy grow. He wants to see Americans prosper. And so if the president, if this information it is true, which I agree, it does appear from what I'm also seeing on television right here, that the president is listening to economists. He's listening to those people around him to make sure that he's not doing something long term that has a negative impact on this economy. And it does give them additional time to go back to these countries that he was going to impose a reciprocal tariffs on, try to have the ability, that 90 days to negotiate, to make sure that in some of these cases that we can find that soft spot, that middle ground that the president is looking for.
Yeah, and look, we still have a problem to solve. I think we would all agree on that. And you have to applaud the president for making it an issue, because in the past it just never gotten any attention. I mean, the Biden administration, the Democrats, at one time, going back even to the 90s, of course, right there in the House floor, Speaker Nancy Pelosi even went to the well to talk about the trade disparity. Like, where are they today, Congressman? They have short memories.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, we've seen so many countries take advantage of us economically by imposing heightened tariffs on American goods, but yet then we impose no or little tariffs on the goods that they send into our country. And the president wants a level playing field. Look, and I believe, and I know you believe, Gerard, that with a level playing field, that Americans can compete globally with any country on the face of the earth.
Oh, heck yeah.
So we've just got to make sure that we have that ability. And look, we also want to make sure we're returning, that we're onshoring back to America some of those crucial jobs that we have allowed over the last several decades to leave America. We got to make sure that, we once again become a country that can manufacture the things that we need. And I think that's what the president is looking at doing. He's a businessman at heart. He wants to see this economy grow. He wants to see Americans prosper. And so, the last thing the president wants to leave is a legacy of a bad economy and a stock market that has dropped dramatically on his watch.
Yeah. Well, by the way, Rhino just sent me a note. It's a 90-day pause on everybody but China. But still, though, we always knew, I think you'd agree, Congressman, if we get a breakthrough, if we get some positive news, and this is one. Okay, so this applies to every country but China. Well, I think what that's telling us is that we're boxing in China. That's the strategy here, and I think that is a wise strategy. What do you think, Congressman?
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, if there's one country that has taken advantage of America far worse than any other country, is China. China has taken advantages of America based on the trade imbalance, based on the fact that, many of their industries are subsidized by their government. They've often been accused of dumping products to try to hurt American companies. We know that they've stolen our technology. And so, I believe that we need to continue to stand up to China. I see China as being the biggest global threat to America. And this president has shown, unlike the last president, that he's willing to stand up to China, and he's not going to allow them to continue to take advantage of our country.
And it's ingrained in their governmental, their social, and their economic systems. They're just corrupt, and they have no regard for human life. That's what makes negotiations so hard with irrational, illogical people.
Well, and I think they have finally met their match. I think you saw President Trump stand up to them during his first term, and now very early in his second term. I think he has shown that he is willing to stand up with them. He's willing to go toe-to-toe. He's willing to put economic penalties on China if they don't treat America fairly.
He just literally posted on his Truth Social account, based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I am hereby raising the tariff charge to China by the USA to 125%, effective immediately. Wow, that's incredible. We're bringing them to a breaking point, something I'm not sure that anybody else could do, but the president's not standing down here.
No, you're exactly right. One thing we know about the president is, he has no fear. He's going to do what he thinks is in the best interest of the country, and he's not scared to stand up to China. And I think in the long run, we'll see that while cost of some goods may go up, things that we depend on from China, that I think in the long run is going to help restore that trade imbalance. And is going to put America on a stronger place globally than we are right now.
I think you're going to see both American companies and even potentially Chinese companies seek other venues, other locations to make their goods to replace what we're getting from China that's subject to such high tariffs.
I agree. I mean, hopefully much of that manufacturing will return back to the United States. But even if all of it doesn't, if it returns to countries that are more favorable in their trade policies than China, I think the president would have been successful.
Yeah, or just not our adversaries, on the global stage. I'm not worried about Canada and Mexico, for example, seeking to go to war with this country the way I am China and their diabolical schemes. I want to make a couple of suggestions to you as well. And I realize that you guys are trying to get this budget package through, extending the Trump tax cuts. But, the president's talked about reducing the corporate income tax rate down to 15%. I wholly support that. Maybe that's something we can take a look at. But I wonder, Congressman, if maybe some sort of reduction of capital gains taxes on shares held in companies if they make certain level of investment in new manufacturing in this country, either expanding existing or new facilities. Maybe you have to hold it for 5 years, investors would. Exempt it from capital gains because they're going to need capital to build all these factories.
Well, and that's one thing that the president did talk about to some extent when he was on the campaign trail, is he wanted to incentivize businesses to bring jobs back to the United States, to increase manufacturing, to give them tax, whether it be a tax-exempt status or receive some sort of tax benefit for expansion, building new facilities here, employing Americans. And so I think as the Ways and Means Committee begins to write the tax package, I think that's something that they're going to try to include there.
Okay.
And of course, the priority is making the tax cuts permanent,
of course,
which we intend to do, and then trying to see within the framework how much additional tax relief that we can provide, whether it be to American businesses or to American workers, to honor as many of the campaign promises that President Trump has made.
Agree. Something else that he's talked about, we got to go, but immediate expensing of all the costs associated with the construction of existing or expansion of existing factories or new factories. Maybe that's something else.
Yeah, that would be
do.
huge. That would create a boom.
Yeah. Congressman, always good to talk to you, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Look forward to seeing your daughter tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking care of her. Appreciate it.
Yep.
We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
Every day is Independence Day. She's golden rule, teaches school. Some folks say it isn't cool, but she says the pledge of allegiance anyway. He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spent a little more in the store for a tag, and the back it says USA.
Okay, is everybody ready?
I'm ready. Ready here.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk, Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Appreciate the Congressman. How weird was that, Rhino, to be conducting an interview with the United States member of the House of United States Representatives, and while we're talking on this subject, we have this breaking news about it from the president, from the White House. I'm just stunned, honestly. And right now, live outside the White House is Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. She's at the mic, and now Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is speaking about this 90-day pause. So Rhino and I were talking offline when, and I apologize for this, when I misinformed about the White House, the administration not responding to proposals. I was wrong. What they weren't responding to were requests for meetings. Now we know why. Does that not add up?
Yeah, if you've got an overwhelming majority of the people you have wanted to change what they're doing, they come to you and say, we're changing what we're doing, then instead of creating the chaos of, all right, let me put you on the calendar for this time slot, we got 2 hours available here, and all right, you're going to be coming after this country, but before this country, and all the political hullabaloo of, well, why do I have to go after them? You just don't respond if you're seeing that swell of, hey, I want to help out, I want to do this, I want to back down, I want to do this. then you just sit on it and wait until you have enough to make this announcement.
I also think that they will proceed. Do you not? Because it's not. That's the purpose of the 90-day. And I have no doubt if they don't make the proper concessions and get in line, that they're going to get slapped in 90 days. The president's going to do it. This is not just an idle threat. He's proven that. It will happen. He's boxing in China. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And you see, and what we don't know is happening in the background, and it's just pure speculation on my part, that it wouldn't surprise if China hasn't been reaching out to other countries to try to band them together to come after us. And they've said, we ain't doing it. We're putting our money on the good old U.S. of A. And that got back to the White House, right? And then the White House says, okay, here's our opening to box in the real bad guys here in this whole trade deal. It's China. Because not only, as you heard the congressman talk about, not only are their tariffs unreasonable, not only do they restrict the import of American goods in so many ways, but you operate over that. You know this. American companies that open up shops over in China, you're pretty much still under the thumb of the CCP.
Not to mention the fact that if you are doing business in America, you may not like the fact that the political winds change on a faster rate than you would like as a business person.
Absolutely.
But you know when you negotiate with an American business in America, you negotiate, you agree to it, you show up to sign the paperwork, the amount you agreed to is on the paperwork.
I totally
Compared
agree.
to China, where you have a negotiation, you go through all the rigmarole, you agree on an amount, you show up to the day you're going to sign the paperwork, and you look down, and all of a sudden, you're paying 20% more. And there is no more negotiation. Take it or leave it.
Totally.
And if you leave it, guess what? They already got everything you already provided them, and they're going to steal it from you and use it for their own gains.
Okay.
That's what you're dealing with, and that's why countries like Australia and Japan and India and all of them are probably going, you know what, China? I may not like America, but I don't like you more.
Yeah, I totally agree. You can take our word to the bank. You may not like it. You can't. And you know, if anybody says, well, no, you can't, here's the evidence that you can. It's our treasuries. When have we ever defaulted? Ever. You buy American debt, you get paid back in full. You cannot rely on that from other countries. So this is just breaking. The White House says universal 10% tariffs on all countries except China.
During the 90-day pause.
No doubt. Exactly, during that period. That's what's going to happen. I'm cool with that. We'd have to call that a victory. And I think we're off to the races. China has escalated the trade war. Again, we're negotiating with people who have no regard or value for human life. They don't. I
wonder how quickly we'll see everyone suffering from Trump derangement syndrome put a Chinese flag in their profile.
Oh, my gosh. So I shared with the audience earlier about the GDP, per capita GDP in this country, 95,000, and in China, average 15,000. You looked up for us the city of Shanghai, China, 24 million population. Just for perspective, that's 3x New York City, right? I think New York's about 8 million. So Shanghai, 24 million. You looked up for us the per capita income of arguably their richest city, most affluent city. And what is it?
It's between them and Beijing.
Okay. And
both of them, like Shanghai, the GDP per capita is $26,300. For Beijing, that comes out to $27,300.
So I looked it up for our most populated state. It's California, with a population of about 40 million. It's 103,000.
GDP per capita.
Right. It's 4x. And you know what else you got to think about? Right, that's after they opened up their dang borders to every freeloader and they crossed the border. I mean, they're awash with it. In California, they have more people. They have the highest GDP, or maybe the second highest per capita GDP of any state. Yet they've got the most people in poverty. It's because they let all the dang illegals in.
Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is these are numbers provided by China.
That's true.
But then again, you kind of have to take them at face value because there's really only two choices for them to fudge the numbers. Either the numbers in reality are lower and they're worse off, or they're trying to sandbag for some reason, but they're sandbagging by 50 to 100%. It doesn't seem like that's likely.
So stocks are tracking for their biggest gain in 5+ years. We might need to send some more military presence to Taiwan now, says DJ and Summit. Surely they ain't that stupid, are they?
I don't think that would be the knee-jerk reaction to this. I think if you see a continuing escalation, that is definitely more likely. But at this point, I don't think that's going to be their next step or even in their next 3 to 5 steps.
Yeah, could be. Landfill Management says, I wonder if this was the plan all along. Oh, of course it was. I was never confused about the president's strategy with respect to reasonable, rational, logical, friendly countries. No doubt. And it's ridiculous that they already haven't adjusted their policies. It's ridiculous to me that Australia won't allow U.S. beef products in. That's crazy to me. And that's an example of unfair trade practices, in my view. But China's always been a concern, just, again, because they're not rational. They're not logical. And it's crazy. Also, let's see, Landfill Management said, don't forget about catfish. That was the other day, but they do impose a 300% tariff on our rice. He said that on Monday as well. Yeah, and we learned that from Mike McCormick from Farm Bureau Federation, that's a problem. And again, that's just because the American farmer's so dang productive. That's just a fact. We produce more than we can eat. That's a good thing. And by the way, we got fewer people working in the industry than we ever have. And we produce more than we can eat. That's a tribute to American innovation and technology. Because farming operations, they're awash with technology. I mean, you've seen that. We've done the shows for our friends at Ag Up, and you see those John Deere implements. Oh, my gosh. It looks like you're inside a helicopter cockpit. I mean, it's unbelievable, the technology. We all benefit from that. All of us do. It's incredible. Mo says, are these tariffs on pharmaceuticals? I'm not sure, but I know the president yesterday, Mose, was talking about some special additional tariff on pharmaceuticals. So all I know is what I read you is he said 125%. Right? That's what he said. Surely they've got the good sense to come to the table and negotiate something reasonable. Mailman Clayton said, after he asked, who do you think will blink first before we got this news, he said, looks like we blinked. Half blinked at least. Absolutely. Let's go on the 601. Let's see. Also, Crosby Simmons says, hey, Rhino, you're doing a fantastic job, buddy. If you would, tell Mr. G that Kathy Willis is my baby sister. She thinks the world of you and your wife. Oh, that's fantastic. Appreciate that. Thanks for y'all's hard work and great programs. Thank you, Crosby, for the feedback. And, yeah, shout out to the Congressman. My daughter's up there with my wife at a book convention. They're into that sort of stuff, and he offered to give her a little guided tour of the Capitol. That's really generous of him. Appreciate that, Congressman Michael Guest. We're coming right back with the final segment.
You're never gonna get my love. You're never gonna break my heart.
Rogers Def. It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show.
On SuperTalk, Mississippi.
edge of no popular trend. Ain't never seen the inside of that magazine GQ. We don't care if you're a lawyer.
That's Leonard Skinner, little red, white, and blue.
Some waitress busting ass at some liquor stand. If you got soul, we hang out with people.
Smoking camels and drinking domestic brews. That's my favorite lyric in the tune. That's one of the songs from the set the house band is going to be playing. I've been trying to rehearse the licks to that one. It's a good tune. Well, we're just a bit stunned here, pleasantly, with the Dow skyrocketing on the news from the White House that the tariffs are going to be paused for 90 days. So the Treasury Secretary, I think he's right here too, by the way, he said that the president goaded China into this bad deal for them. And I think, I'm telling you, man, he had some idea, some understanding. Maybe it was just a strongly held belief from all the deal making he's done in his career that our friendly trading partners would act responsibly, but that China would not. But in imposing these tariffs universally, so to speak, the friendlier nations and trading partners would respond positively. China wouldn't. He just also announced that the 10% tariff that he seeks universal applies to Mexico and Canada as well. So I'm not sure what that means necessarily, but it does appear that that was the strategy. And it doesn't give us any relief with respect to goods coming in from China, but it sure does put them behind the eight ball, as the saying goes, to come to the table with something rational. I know it's hard for you communists that don't give a darn about human life. I know it's a tough one. And as you pointed out, they're probably looking at their personal bank accounts. They don't care about those of the proletariat. They're worried about the Politburo.
Yeah, Xi Jinping is looking at his Scrooge McDuck vault of gold coins going, how much of this am I going to have to sacrifice to stay afloat, stay in power?
Totally true. That's what's going on there. It's affecting him personally. That's what he's thinking. So I'm optimistic that they will come to the table with something reasonable. I really am, and I hope so. It would certainly be a great deal.
I don't foresee them doing anything drastic in the next 5 days.
I think that's right.
Simply because there have been so many reports leaked out of China of factories shutting down entirely and all workers being given notice that they are on quote-unquote holiday until the 13th.
Crazy.
And that was after the imposition of the 104% tariffs.
So Thomas in Greenwood says, so now it's just the farmers who will suffer the most. No, I don't think that's true. I mean, we export a lot of stuff to China besides agricultural products, and of course we import a whole lot to China. We got a 125% tariff on those goods coming across our border from the Red Nation. But again, I think Rhino's right. To save face, they're not going to immediately react. I'm right. That would make you appear weak and bending at the knees, so to speak. I don't see that happening. And again, because that's more important, right, than the advantages or the benefits to the country in general. They don't really care about that. That's secondary to their personal image. And that's consistent with communist doctrine. It's built on that.
That's why it's against the law to post a picture of Winnie the Pooh on Chinese social media.
Why is that? I had no idea.
Because of his resemblance to Xi Jinping.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. That's sick. That's crazy. But I will say this, and I shared this with Rhino off the air. What's the population's like 1.2 billion, right, in China? Isn't that right? I think so. We're 330.
1.4 billion.
Okay, I missed it. 1.4. Imagine if they magically were to adopt democracy, government of the people, and capitalism. Now, they have somewhat, and they're still poor because it's still under the thumb of Xi Jinping and his inner circle. But if they went all out, mainstream with the same systems we have in this country, would they be a force to be reckoned with or not with 1.4 billion? I'm not saying tomorrow, but if things were different, I think the whole world would benefit, honestly. We're out of here today in Columbus tomorrow. Tune in to us then. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi media production.